This is David Mould. I'm reading from my book, Postcards from the Borderlands. This excerpt is entitled Passport from Adolescence. Growing up in Britain in the 1950s and early 1960s, I counted myself lucky that my parents took the family on annual camping vacations in Europe. While other families shivered on stony, windswept English beaches, we were swimming and, blithely unaware of the health risks, toasting our pale skins on Mediterranean beaches. From the age of 8, I faithfully recorded details of these trips in my diary, including the excitement of crossing borders. After taking the car ferry across the English Channel, we disembarked at Calais or Boulogne. French gendarmes, in stylish, neatly pressed dark blue uniforms and peaked hats, inspected our passports, smiled at the 2 children in the back seat, and wished us bon voyage. At the Spanish border, the Guardia Civil, with their distinctive black tricornio hats and semi-automatic weapons, looked a bit more menacing, but were just as welcoming. On those childhood vacations, I travelled on my father's passport as a, quote, accompanying child. At the time I did not think of this as a demeaning category, yet it was a proud day when, in March 1965, at the age of 15, I was issued my first passport. My mother insisted on a haircut and a new shirt and tie for the formal passport photo session. The inside of the passport front cover bore the seal of the monarch, and a stern instruction in elaborate cursive not to mess with the Queen's loyal subject. Her Britannic Majesty's Principal Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs requests and requires, in the name of Her Majesty, all those to whom it may concern, to allow the bearer to pass freely without let or hindrance, and to afford the bearer such assistance and protection as may be necessary. Today this language feels quaint, the pompous posturing of a country that since the end of World War II had surrendered its empire in Asia, Africa and the Caribbean, but was not yet ready to accept its new, reduced role in the world. The curious phrase, requests and requires, seems almost passive-aggressive. The passport was valid, quote, for all parts of the Commonwealth and for all foreign countries. The British Empire was gone, but at least we still had the Commonwealth, even though some of its member countries were ruled by autocrats whom the British had thrown into jail during the struggle for independence. The former imperial master was now forced to acknowledge these rascals by inviting them to meetings in London and asking them to put on airport military parades to greet visiting members of the royal family. That first passport was a sign of passage from childhood to adolescence, although my profession was still listed as schoolboy. 5 years later, fresh out of college and ready to start work as a newspaper reporter, I had the passport office cross out schoolboy and insert trainee journalist. I forgot to ask them to adjust my height. I'd grown 3 inches. In 1975, when I got a new 10-year passport, I was still confusingly described as a, quote, citizen of the United Kingdom and colonies. All the large colonies had achieved independence at least a decade earlier. What was left was a scattering of small islands and island groups in the Caribbean, Indian Ocean, South Atlantic and Pacific, and the remote British Antarctic Territory. The best-known remaining colonies were Gibraltar, which Spain claims, and Hong Kong, which was only on lease anyway and was handed back to China in 1997. After I became a naturalized United States citizen in 1991, I let my UK passport lapse and travelled on a US passport for the next 12 years. I applied for a new UK European Union passport in 2003 after the US invaded Iraq. I hoped I might be more welcome in some countries as a loyal subject of Her Britannic Majesty rather than as a traveller from the land of Bush and Cheney. In the end, it made no difference because the old ally followed the US lead in its foreign policy and military engagements. In fact, the UK European passport was really only useful for speeding up entry to the UK and France, where my sister lives. Since Brexit, it's probably not worth renewing. With 2 passports, I have one more than most people. I'm still a long way away from matching the collection of my passport hero, Jason Bourne, the CIA-trained rogue assassin, played by Matt Damon, in the action thriller movies based on the novels of Robert Ludlum. Bourne is picked up by fishermen in the Mediterranean Sea with 2 gunshots in his back and a device with the number of a Swiss bank account embedded in his hip. He discovers he's fluent in several languages and skilled at navigation and hand-to-hand combat, but he has no idea who he is or how he ended up floating in the sea. In Zurich, he opens his safe deposit box to find $5 million in various currencies, a handgun, and credit cards. There are 6 passports: Canadian, French, Russian, Brazilian, and 2 United States passports, with his photo, each with a different name and the appropriate visas. He picks the name on the first of the 2 US passports, Jason Bourne. In future scenes, as he nears a border or as guards move down the train corridor, he sifts through the passport pack and selects his next identity. Fellow travellers sometimes ask me why I have 2 passports. No one asks me if I'm Jason Bourne. Postcards from the Borderlands by David Mould, published by Open Books, is available from Amazon and other online booksellers.